Hey everyone, it's Taylorverse, and I've been gone for a long time. I was taking care of myself and my family, but I'm back. Don't know if it's a permanent thing or if I'll have to go again, but for now, I am here. I am here. Anyway, I found that book, The Serial Killer Files by Harold Sketcher? We're gonna go with that. My cat's over there. Anyway, before we get started, I have a little ad. And yes, I know, I don't show you other ads, but this is my ad. So, do you like body jewelry? I now have a code with a company to get you 25% off. I am wearing one of their septum rings right now. It's nice and pink, and in the black light it glows. And honestly, I don't like neon, but I like this. I'm trying something new, and I like it. It's not gaudy. But if you go to bodycandy.com and use code Taylor Curtis 25 at checkout, you'll get 25% off. Plus, if you're a new shopper, you get 25% off anyway. So, I mean, hey. Anyway, add over. It'll all be in the description and whatnot. Back to the book. Let's do this shit. Van. What it means. Origin of the term. One reason people tend to think that serial murder is a frighteningly new phenomenon is that, until about 20 years ago, no one ever heard of such a thing. For most of the 20th century, the news media never referred to serial killers, but that isn't because homicidal psychos didn't exist in the past. Indeed, one of the most infamous American serial killers of all time, Albert Fish, committed his atrocities around the time of the Great Depression. After his arrest, his unspeakable crimes were covered extensively by the newspapers. Nowhere, however, is Fish described as a serial killer. The reason is simple. The phrase hadn't yet been invented. Uh-oh. Is that gonna work? Shut up. Ah, shit. Hold up. Okay. Back then, the type of crime we now define as serial murders was simply lumped together under the general rubric of mass murder. Credit for coining the phrase serial killer is commonly given the former FBI special agent Robin Ressler, one of the founding members of the Bureau's Elite Behavioral Science Unit, aka the Mind Hunters, or the Psyche Squad. Along with his colleague, John Douglas, Ressler served as a model for the character Jack Crawford in Tom Harris's Hannibal Lecter trilogy. In his 1992 memoir, Whoever Fights Monsters, Ressler writes that, in the early 1970s, while attending a week-long conference at the British Police Academy, he heard a fellow participant refer to crimes in series, meaning a series of rapes, burglaries, arsons, or murders. Ressler was so impressed by the phrase that, upon returning to Quantico he began using the term serial killer in his own lectures to describe the killing of those who do one murder, then another, and another in a fairly repetitive way. Mass murders laid to butt girls slayer. In thinking up the term, Ressler also says he had in mind the motive matinee adventure serials of his boyhood: Spy Smashers, Flash Gordon, The Masked Marvel, etc. Like a child looking forward to the latest installment of his favorite cliffhanger, the serial killer can't wait to commit his next atrocity. That is Ressler's version of how he came to invent the phrase that has now become such a vital part of our language. I wouldn't say that that's vital. Nope. Well, I mean, if you're fucked up like me, it is. But that's only because me and my friend talk about serial killers a lot. And go to museums with serial killer shit. But, yeah. Only if you're a weirdo like I am is serial killer really vital to your fucking language. There's just one problem with the story. There is documented proof that the expression serial murderer existed at least a dozen years before Ressler supposedly invented it. According to Jesse Schildlower, editor of the major new revision of the Oxford English Dictionary, the term can be traced back as far as 1961. We're gonna get rid of the face cam, 'cause I can't read like this. Go away. Where it appears in a citation from Merriam-Webster's Third New International Dictionary. The quote, which is attributed to the German critic Siegfried Kracauer, is he denies that he is a pursued serial murderer. I'm guessing there's supposed to be a photo there. Oh wait, count the pages, motherfucker. First documented use of the term serial murderer as it appears in okay. I guess it's a picture of the dictionary that's not actually there. By the mid-1960s, the term serial murderer has become common enough, at least overseas, that it was used repeatedly in the 1966 book The Meaning of Murder by the British writer John Bruffy. It's possible that during his visit to England, where Bruffy's book was originally published, Ressler picked up the term, perhaps subliminally. To give credit where it is due, it was evidently Ressler who altered the phrase from serial murderer to the slightly more punchy serial killer. In any event, if he can't really be credited with coining the expression, Ressler certainly helped introduce it into American culture. Surprisingly, it did not enter into common usage until quite recently. The earliest published example of the phrase serial killer that the editors of the Oxford Dictionary have been able to come up with is only 20 years old. It comes from the article Leading the Hunt in Atlanta's Murders by M.A. Farber, published in the May 3rd, 1981 issue of the New York Times Magazine. Here, reprinted for the first time, is the known passage containing the first known published use of the term serial killer. Someone raising a question that trails Brown from forum to forum asks about race and the murders. Some Atlantans fear racial violence if a serial killer is discovered to be white. Definitions. Since the term serial killer was invented to describe a type of criminal, you'd think the definition would be clear-cut. However, confusion surrounds the term. Even the experts can't agree. Let's start with the official FBI definition. 3 or more separate events in 3 or more separate locations with an emotional cooling-off period in between homicides. This definition stresses 3 elements. Quantity. There have to be at least 3 murders. Place. The murders have to occur in different locations. time. There has to be a cooling-off period, an interval between the murders that can last anywhere from several hours to several years. The last two characteristics are meant to differentiate serial killing from mass murder, in which a suicidal, rage-filled individual slaughters a bunch of people at once. A disgruntled employee, for example, who shows up at his office with an automatic weapon and blows away half a dozen co-workers before turning the gun on himself. There are several problems with the FBI definition. In one aspect, it's much too broad, since it can be applied to homicidal types who aren't serial killers. Professional hitmen, for example, or Western outlaws like William, Billy the Kid, Bonney, who is said to have gunned down 21 men before he reached the age of 21. Mad bombers like Ted Kaczynski, who meet the FBI's criteria, but none of these types match the common conception of a serial killer. I just watched a video on Ted Kaczynski. Otherwise, I would have very much botched the name. It was very good, actually. In another respect, the FBI definition is overly narrow, since it specifies that a serial killer has to commit his crimes in three or more separate locations. To be sure, some serial killers range far and wide in their search for prey. Ted Bundy, for example, murdered women in several different states. Others, however, prefer to do their dirty work in one place. John Wayne Gacy, for example, turned his basement of his suburban split level into a private torture chamber, and even disposed of his victims' remains at home, stashing them in the crawl space until he ran out of room. Gacy's a fucked up individual, I'll tell you what. I mean, they all are, but Gacy gets me. Maybe because the whole... Oh, whatever. We'll get to that. The main defect in the FBI definition, however, is what's missing from it. Namely, any sense of the specific nature of the crimes. When Siegfried Kraucher first used the term serial murderer, he was discussing the character played by Peter Lorre in Fritz Lang's classic movie M, a repulsive moon-faced pervert who preys on little girls. That's nice. A few years later, John Brophy used it to describe killers like Jack the Ripper and Earl Leonard Nelson, the infamous guerrilla murderer of the 1920s, who strangled and raped several dozen women across the U.S. and up into Canada. And when Robert Ressler and his colleagues in the Behavioral Science Unit adopted the term in the 1970s, they applied it to homicidal psychopaths like Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, and Edmund Kemper. In all these cases, there was one common thread, a strong component of depraved sexuality. Yeah. Recognizing this fact, some experts stress the sexual motivations behind serial murder, defining it as the act of ultra-violent deviants who get twisted pleasure from inflicting extreme harm on their victims and who will keep on committing their atrocities until they are stopped. Of course, there are criminals who match this profile, but who can't be considered serial killers for one simple reason. They're caught after committing one single homicide. An example is James Lawson, described in the book The Evil That Men Do by Stephen Michaud and former FBI Special Agent Roy Hazelwood, another member of the FBI's original Mindhunter team. A convicted rapist, Lawson was sent to a California state mental institution where he struck up a friendship with the fellow inmate, James Odom. The two men began sharing their fantasies of rape and murder, encouraging each other's sickest impulses and forming a bond based on their mutual depravity. No sooner when they were released than they decided to put their dreams into action, abducting a 25-year-old female convenience store clerk They drove her to an isolated location. First, Odom raped her in the back seat while Lawson watched. Then Lawson went to work on her with his knife. Oh, got a quote from him himself. I wanted to cut her body so she would not look like a person, and destroy her so she would not exist. I began to cut on her body. I remember cutting her breasts off. After that, all I remember is I kept cutting on her body. Lovely. Fortunately, the two men were traced and arrested in short order. However, Lawson's case raises an interesting question. There's no doubt that he had the mentality of a serial killer. His confession makes that brutally clear. How many women would he have to butcher before qualifying for that label? 3 or more, according to the FBI definition, but that number seems arbitrary. Let's suppose that over the span of several weeks, the police in a small California town had found the remains of 2 female victims, killed and mutilated in the same way. Wouldn't they be justified in suspecting that a serial killer was on the loose? These flaws in the FBI definition are rectified in another, more flexible one, formulated by the National Institutes of Justice, which many authorities regard as a more accurate description. Kitty, that tickle is quit licking my tootsies. Little shit. A series of 2 or more murders committed as separate events, usually but not always, by one offender acting alone. The crimes may occur over a period of time ranging from hours to years. Quite often the motive is psychological, and the offender's behavior and the physical evidence observed at the crime scene will reflect sadistic sexual overtones. Categories of carnage, serial mass spree. Though people sometimes confuse the terms and use them interchangeably, there are important differences between serial murder and the other major types of multiple homicide, mass murder, and spree killing. For the most part, serial murder is a sex crime, and a fact that accounts for a distinctive feature. The classic pattern of serial murder is a grotesque travesty of normal sexual functioning. Most people who haven't had sex for a while begin to crave it more and more. They daydream about it. In vulgar terms, they grow increasingly horny. Such a serious fucking book, and then suddenly, in vulgar terms, they grow increasingly horny. Hooey shit. That may be my favorite line in the book. Oh. If unattached, they eventually seek out a willing partner. Once they've gratified their sexual urges, the need subsides for a certain period of time. In a parallel way, the serial killer spends his time fantasizing about dominance, torture, and murder. In effect, he grows horny for blood. When his twisted desires get too strong to resist, he goes prowling for unwitting prey. His excitement reaches a climax with the suffering and death of the victim. Afterward, he experiences a cooling-off period. This is somewhat of a misnomer, since it is during this lull between crimes that the killer's bloodlust begins to build again. It would be more accurate to describe it as a cooling-off/heating up period. During this time, he may make use of trophies he has from a murder scene to relive the crime in his mind, savoring the memory of the victim's suffering. In short, their unspeakable acts are a source of supreme pleasure to serial killers who achieve the highest pitch of arousal. even to the point of orgasm, by inflicting savage harm on other human beings, because doing terrible things feels so good to them. Serial killers try not to get caught, so they can keep on enjoying their atrocities for as long as possible. Mass murder. Apart from the fact that they both involve multiple homicides, mass murder and serial killing have almost nothing in common. Whereas the serial killer is often described as a predator, the mass murderer is stereotypically defined as the human time bomb. Though there have been a number of female mass murderers, the great preponderance are male. In general, the mass murderer is someone whose life has come unraveled, who has been thrown out by his wife, or fired from his job, or suffered some other humiliating blow that pushes him over the edge. Filled with an annihilating rage at everything he blames his failure, he explodes in a burst of devastating violence that wipes out everyone within range, a phenomenon that has entered slang as going postal, a sardonic tribute to the number of U.S. Postal Service workers who seem to have perpetrated such acts. Really? The damn mailman? Did not know this. If serial murder is, in essence, a sex crime, mass murder is almost always a suicidal one. In blind, apocalyptic fury, the mass murderer has decided to go out with a bang and take as many people with him as possible. Typically, once the bloodbath is over, the mass murderer will either end his own life or provoke a fatal shootout with the police. Suicide by cop, as it's called. Someday, before I kill myself, I'll bring some people down with me. Sylvia Segrist, mass murderer. Since his intention is to blow away as many people as possible, the mass murderer almost always uses firearms. This is in marked contrast to most serial killers who, with notable exceptions like David, son of Sam Berkowitz, and Zodiac. Oh, the Zodiac killer intrigues me. Prefer the sadistic hands-on thrill of stabbing, strangling, mauling, and mutilating. A key element of mass murder is that, by definition, it occurs in a single location. Indeed, it is this factor as much as anything else that amounts for the devastating nature of the crime. The mass murderer is someone who, like a suicide bomber, detonates without warning in a restaurant, a playground, a schoolroom, an office, or even, as in the 1999 case of Larry Gene Ashbrook, a church, turning a safe, familiar setting into a scene of a corpse-strewn massacre. Though mass murderers don't exert the same morbid fascination as serial killers, largely because their crimes are less sensationally gruesome and sexually perverted, they often run up substantial body counts. Charles Whitman, for example, the Texas Tower sniper who on August 1st, 1966, barricaded himself on the observation deck overlooking the University of Texas campus and began picking off people below, killed 14 victims in the course of his massacre. And even this grim total was surpassed by the case of James Huberty, one of the worst mass murder episodes of modern times. Case study: James Huberty at the McDonald's massacre. Oh, Lord. The site was significant. A suburban McDonald's restaurant. This all-American symbol of happy family life and material satisfaction represented everything that James Oliver Huberty had struggled so hard and failed so miserably to achieve. His life had been difficult from the start. His mother, a religious zealot, became a missionary and abandoned her family when James was only 7. Raised by his father, he grew up lonely and resentful, a boy whose sole companion was his dog and whose only interest was guns. His earliest ambition, to work in a funeral home, didn't pan out. Though he received a license from the Pittsburgh Institute of Mortuary Science, he lacked the personal skills necessary for a successful mortician. He was a good embalmer, but just didn't relate to people, was one professional assessment. Still, he managed to prosper for a while. In 1965, at the age of 23, he married his girlfriend Etna. A few years later, they moved into a comfortable house in Massillon, Ohio. By the early 70s, Huberty was the father of two, with a good steady job as a welder at the utility plant in nearby Canton. His family was the center of his existence. Outside of Etna and the girls, he had no social contacts. He bickered constantly with his neighbors and spent much of his spare time reading gun magazines and survivalist literature. On the whole, however, Huberty's life during this period was as stable and content as it would ever be. The bottom fell out in the early 1980s when hard times hit the area. The plant closed. Huberty lost his job and, as Edna later put it, his life came crashing in around him. After nearly 6 months of unemployment, he landed another job but was soon laid off again. He started to talk of suicide and worse. According to an acquaintance, it was around this time that Huberty began voicing scary thoughts. He said he had nothing to live for, no job or anything. He said that if this was the end of his making his living for his family, he was going to take everyone with him. In late 1983, in a desperate hunt for a better life, the 41-year-old Huberty moved his family to San Isidro, California, a suburb of San Diego, just north of the Mexican border. He found work as a security guard, but the job didn't last. His family was forced to move again and again, each time to a slightly shabbier apartment. Huberty grew increasingly paranoid, venting his bitterness at the world. On Wednesday, July 18, 1984, after a morning trip to traffic court to pay a ticket, Huberty reached the end of the line. Society had its chance, he said to his wife. In their bedroom a few hours later, he dressed in camouflage pants and a black t-shirt. The wife asked where he was going. Hunting humans, he said. Not long afterward, he showed up at a local McDonald's with a semi-automatic rifle, a 9mm pistol, a 12-gauge shotgun, and a canvas bag full of ammo. Almost immediately, he opened fire. 75 minutes later, 21 people were dead, many of them children, and another 19 wounded. The massacre didn't stop until a SWAT team member sniper fired a .308 caliber into James Huberty's head. Nope, dark heart. I was trying to make it more suspenseful. Okay. Where was that? It was a case study. Okay. Well, I hadn't heard of that one. Lovely. Who the fuck goes to a McDonald's? Like, bitch, McDonald's, I get it. Like, it's supposed to be the happy place, but, like, leave the happy people alone. Damn, like, if you go to a restaurant, do Burger King. If you go to Burger King, you're already miserable. I know I'm not talking shit about Burger King. I like Burger King, but you know what? I'm miserable. Anyway, spree killing. With one key exception, spree and mass murder are more or less identical phenomena. Like the mass murderer, the spree killer is someone who has become so profoundly alienated or embittered that he no longer feels connected to human society. His life has amounted to nothing, and his murderous rampage is his way of bringing his intolerable existence to an explosive end. Most spree killers prefer death to surrender. Others allow themselves to be captured, knowing that they will be executed or locked away forever. One way or another, their lives are over. Two major motives fuel the spree killer's final hate-filled act: revenge against the world, and a desire to show that all evidence to the contrary, he is a person to be reckoned with. Tormented by his failure to achieve those things that seem to come so easily to others, satisfying work, loving relationships, he will prove that he is special in at least one regard, in his power to wreak havoc. Like the mass murderer, the spree killer sometimes targets specific victims, the boss who fires him, the professor who flunked him, the bully who made his high school years a living hell. But the randomness with which he mows down everyone unlucky enough to cross his path shows that his rage is really directed against society itself. The defining difference between a spree killer and a mass murderer has to do with motion. Whereas the mass murderer slaughters in one place, the spree killer moves from site to site, killing as he goes. In that case, spree killing can be best described as mobile mass murder. In 1949, for example, a crazed ex-GI named Howard Unruh stunned the nation when he strode through his quiet New Jersey neighborhood and methodically gunned down everyone in his path. Oh, another case study. Howard Unruh, the Retaliator. I'm not gonna do the voice again. I may, default into the news voice again, but... The first major spree killer of the post-World War II era, Howard Barton Unruh fit the classic profile of his kind. In the fall of 1949, he was a 28-year-old misfit, living alone with his mother in a shabby 3-room apartment in East Camden, New Jersey. His empty, aimless existence couldn't be drearier. He had no job, no friends, no prospects for the future. A closeted gay. Oh. In an intensely homophobic era, I feel bad for him. I can't help but feel for these people. It's just that a switch is flipped in the wrong direction in their head and they go crazy. Oops. They just have a shitty life. And they're fucked up in the head. They can't help that. I feel bad for them. And I think that's why I'm so intrigued by them, because a lot of the times it's not really their fault. They're just really fucked up. Oh, shit. $36 of 8. Okay. He led a sordid, secret life, traveling to Philadelphia several times a week for a loveless sex with anonymous pickups. Otherwise, he spent much of his time playing with his toy trains or practicing pistol shooting in a makeshift target range in his basement. Just a few years earlier, he had felt like somebody. He was in the army, where he had distinguished himself during the war as a gunner in the 342nd Armored Field Artillery. Now back home, he was a nothing, an utter failure. He had tried college, enrolling in Temple University's School of Pharmacology under the GI Bill, but he had dropped out only after 3 months. He became convinced that his neighbors were talking behind his back, viewing him with contempt for living off his frail, aging mum. He began to keep a diary, listing grievances against his neighbors, and making little cryptic notations beside their name. Rhett, WTS, or DNDR. Abbreviation stood for retaliate when time's suitable. or do not delay retaliation. On Tuesday, September 6, 1949, the day of retaliation arrived. Rising promptly at 8 a.m., Howard washed, shaved, and dressed in his best tropical worsted suit, white shirt, and bow tie. He went into the kitchen for his breakfast, prepared as always by his doting mom, who noticed that Howard seemed strangely distracted. After polishing off fried eggs and post toasties, he went down to the basement, returning with a length of heavy lead pipe. Summoning his mother into the living room, he raised the pipe threateningly, as if to brain her. "What do you want to do that for, Howard?" Miss Unruh stammered. Backing toward the door, she flung it open and fled the house in terror. Howard stood for a moment, then shaking off his daze, went into his bedroom, got his 9mm Luger pistol with 2 loaded clips and 33 loose cartridges, and hit the streets. His first stop was Pilkerick's shoe shop. The owner, John Pilkerick, was kneeling by his bench, nailing a sole onto a shoe when Unruh entered at 9:20 a.m. Unruh strode directly up to Pilkerick and, without a word, shot the cobbler in the face, then fired again into his head. He turned and headed next door to Clark Hoover's barber shop. Hoover was busily trimming the hair of a 6-year-old boy named Orris Smith. "I've got something for you, Clarky," Unruh said, as he stepped to the chair and shot both the barber and the little boy. As the child's mother, who was seated nearby, shrieked and ran toward her dying boy, Unruh nonchalantly headed out. "Oh God, he didn't even kill her. He just left her with her dying son. That's nice." Over the next 10 minutes, he calmly made his way through the neighborhood, shooting victims as he went, both specific targets of his paranoid hatred and random passerby unfortunate enough to find themselves in his way. When he ran out of ammunition less than 15 minutes after his firing first shot into the face of John Pilkerick, 13 people lay dead or dying. Another 3 were badly wounded. Returning to his apartment, Unruh flopped down on his bed. Moments later, about 6 heavily armed officers surrounded the house. A ferocious gun battle ensued, ending when Unruh was driven from his room by tear gas. As Unruh was being handcuffed, the officer asked, "What's the matter with you? You some kind of psycho?" "I'm no psycho," Unruh indignantly said. "I have a good mind." The state disagreed. Unruh was permanently confined to a maximum security psychiatric hospital for the criminally insane. While Howard Unruh turned his neighborhood into a corpse-littered battleground during 13 horrifying minutes, some spree killers cover far more territory, conducting their rampage by car over the span of days or even weeks. That was the case in late 1957, when a pair of teen hoodlums, James Dean wannabe Charles Starkweather, and his underage sweetheart, Carol Ann Fugate, oh my God, sped across Nebraska, killing 10 people over 26 days. In the spring of 1997, Andrew Cunanan, I don't know, slaughtered 4 men as he made his way in a succession of stolen vehicles from Minneapolis to Miami Beach in search of his ultimate target, the celebrated Italian fashion designer Gianni Versace. Bruh. And in the fall of 2002, John Muhammad and his teenage protege, Lee Malvo, allegedly terrorized Virginia, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. from a blue Chevy Caprice. After first committing a pair of shootings down in Montgomery, Alabama. For a variety of reasons, the interval between shootings, the taunting messages to the police, the sinister calling card left at one crime scene, many experts assume that a serial killer was on the loose while the sniper shootings were taking place. Once caught, the alleged perpetrator. For fuck's sake. I cannot read. I swear to God I'm dyslexic. Have not been tested for it. But dear God. Once the alleged perpetrators were caught, however, it became clear that Muhammad fit the definition of a spree killer, a man with a miserably failed personal and professional life, venting his rage in a murderous vendetta against the world. Okay. Um... 40. Well, you'll get to at least 50. At least. And then we'll stop. A better term. Since mass and spree murder are essentially two manifestations of the same psychological phenomenon, a new term has recently been proposed that covers both kinds of crimes. In a series of articles published shortly before the first anniversary of the Columbine massacre, the New York Times referred to the figures like Dylan Klebold, Charles Whitman, and others as rampage killers, a highly expressive phrase that pinpoints the essential differences between these types of offenders and serial killers. I don't need recommended readings. Psychopath versus psychotic. When the arresting officer asked Howard Unruh if he was some kind of psycho, he was using a common slang term nowadays most commonly associated with the title of Alfred Hitchcock's classic slasher film. But the policeman's question is more complicated than it may seem. There are two different types of psychos, psychopaths and psychotics. Most serial killers fall in the first category, though some belong to the latter. Psychopaths, the mask of insanity. Oh, the mask of sanity. What? Serial killers have a dead conscience. No morals, no scruples, no conscience. Fun fact, my mom, as I was growing up, truly believed that I was a sociopath. Truly. Because my father is a psychopath. Truly. So I have been tested thoroughly and can say I am not either. Fun facts. Technically, psychopaths aren't legally insane. They know the difference between right and wrong. They are rational, often highly intelligent people. This is really fucked up because, I'm reading about my dad right now. Ugh, I hate reading shit about psychopaths. I really do. Because, I never really got to know my dad. He was out of the picture when I was 2. And I've heard many stories. Definitely a psychopath. Definitely. And then reading this shit just makes me think of shit, and I'm like, oh. Ugh. Some are capable of great charm. Indeed, the scariest thing about them is that they seem so normal. Their pleasant personalities, however, are just a show. Underneath their masks of sanity. I get it now. To use the famous phrase coined by psychologist Hervey Kleckley, they are profoundly disturbed individuals. The most striking feature of a psychopathic personality is the utter lack of empathy. He is incapable of love, incapable of caring, incapable of feeling sorry for anyone but himself. Other people are simply objects to be exploited and manipulated for his own profit and pleasure. I hate reading this kind of fucking shit. Especially because, like, my mom had me tested for both. Because, like, I do fit some of this shit. Honestly. Like, I have empathy, but not a lot. I am capable of love. I only feel sorry for people if they are very close to me. If I don't know them, I don't give a fuck. If I wanted to, I could manipulate anyone I wanted. But I don't want to. Just because that's what my dad did. So, like, the psychopathic tendencies are there, but I don't use them. If that makes sense. And that's what mainly bothers me about reading this shit. Anyway, as criminologist Edward Glover puts it in his book, The Roots of Crime, I've read that. Very good. Psychopaths are outstandingly selfish, egotistical, and deceitful. Nothing matters to them but their own needs, and at their worst, they have monstrous dreams of torture, rape, and murder that they pursue without the slightest complication. Compunction. Can I word today? That would be cool. I would like to word. Such extreme criminal psychopaths are devious, cold-blooded predators who hide their evil hearts behind bland, plausible facades. Because they feel no guilt or remorse, psychopaths are able to maintain an uncanny cool in situations that would cause a normal person to break into a cold sweat. I have that. For example, well, to a degree, I have that. If it's my mom, I break the fuck down. Other than that, I'm fine. For example, when one of Jeffrey Dahmer's handcuffed and bleeding victims managed to escape and run out into the street, Dahmer calmly talked the police into returning the young man to his custody. He then led him back to his hellish lair and slaughtered him. I didn't know that one. Holy shit. Ooh. How did I not know that? Wow. Melville on psychopaths. Though the term psychopath wasn't coined until 1891 by a German psychologist named Koch, the kind of personality it describes has always existed. The great American novelist Herman Melville not only recognized this fact, but created a powerful portrait of a criminal psychopath in his final masterpiece, Billy Budd. One of Melville's major themes is the lurking evil concealed behind benign appearances. In Billy Budd, this theme is embodied in the character John Claggart, a seemingly friendly man who is wicked to the core. At one point in the novella, the author pauses to contemplate the source of Claggart's villainy. Living in a pre-Freudian age, Melville does not use the clinical language of modern-day psychology in accounting for the character's behavior, relying instead on such old-fashioned phrases as natural depravity and the mania of an evil nature. But his description of the master-at-arms' malevolent personality makes it clear that Claggart is a classic instance of what we now call a criminal psychopath. Though the man's even temper and discreet bearing would seem to imitate a mind peculiarly subject to the law of reason, not the less in heart he would seem to write in complete exemption from that law, having apparently little to do with reason further than to employ it as an ambidexter implement for effecting the irrational. That is to say, toward the accomplishment of an aim which, in what wantonness of atrocity would seem to partake of the insane, he will direct a cool judgment, sagacious and sound. These men are madmen, and of the most dangerous sort, for their lunacy is not continuous, but occasional, evoked by some special object. In this passage, Melville pinpoints the essence of the psychopath. A person who commits the most unspeakable atrocities with cool, rational judgment. Moral insanity. During Melville's lifetime, psychiatrists both here and in Europe were grappling with the same problem as Billy Budd: how to explain the psychology of criminals who are rational and even intelligent, but who take pleasure in committing murders that are so hideously savage as to seem, by definition, insane. The term they came up with was moral insanity. Ow. Whew. In the early 1870s, for example, a 12-year-old boy named Jesse Harding Pomeroy attacked and tortured a series of younger boys in Boston. After less than 17 months at a reformatory, he was released only to commit a pair of hideous mutilation murders to a little boy and girl. Under arrest, the boy fiend, as the newspapers dubbed him, was examined by various psychiatrists, who found that he had sharp wits and a good memory, had no delusions whatsoever, possessed a knowledge of right and wrong in the abstract, and had an above-normal intellectual capacity. At the same time, he was unquestionably defective on the moral side to a degree which was plainly much more pronounced than in the criminal. The unusual, atrocious, and cruel nature of his criminal acts, his pursuits of crime for crime's sake only, his utter insensibility to suffering, and his gratification in torturing victims for the same reason that a cat does a mouse before killing it, all plainly indicated that his motives and conduct were far different from those of the ordinary malefactor. In short, the experts concluded that though Pomeroy was intellectually unimpaired, he was morally insane, or, as they variously described him, a moral degenerate, a moral defective, or a moral imbecile. Though these terms don't sound particularly scientific or politically correct, fuck. Go back. They are exactly what we mean nowadays by a psychopath. These patients have good memory and understanding, ability to reason and contrive, much cleverness and cunning, and a general appearance of rationality, coexistent with very deficient control, absence of moral sense, and human sentiments and feelings, perverted and brutal instincts, and propensities for criminal acts of various kinds, which may be perpetrated deliberately and cleverly planned, yet committed with little or no motive, and regardless of the consequences to themselves and others. 19th century definition of moral insanity. 47. Alright. Fuck. Psychotics, the living nightmare. Psychosis is defined as a severe mental disorder characterized by some degree of personality disintegration. Oh, it's only 8:32. Shit, I thought it was fucking late. I usually make videos so fucking late. I started my nighttime routine at like 5 o'clock and I never do that, so it feels so late to me. Like, I took my medicine at 5 and I usually take it at 8, so I totally thought it was like 11 and I needed to go the fuck to bed. But nah, it's only 8:30. Shit. I'm over here trying to rush to read. Shit. Let's have some fun. Long episode. Coming back. Shit. How y'all doing? I'm going crazy. Not because of this. Oh, you got a dog? That's nice. I want a dog. Oh, your sister's a bitch? Oh. I'm losing my mind in quarantine. I bet you're losing your mind too, aren't you? Are you losing your mind? Yeah, I knew it. Psychotics live in a nightmare. Psychotics live in a nightmarish world of their own. They suffer from hallucinations and delusions, hear voices, see visions, are possessed by bizarre beliefs. Wait a minute. Why don't I just do that? For fuck's sake, now I can turn my fucking phone, not break my damn wrist. They have lost touch with reality, unlike psychopaths who appear to be normal, rational people. Even while leading grotesque secret lives, psychotics match the common conception of insanity. The main forms of psychosis are schizophrenia and paranoia. For the most part, serial killers aren't psychotic. There have been some notable exceptions, however, like the paranoid schizophrenic Herbert Mullen. Case study. Herbert Mullen and the Die Song. I really hope we get to see the Die Song. Please tell me this motherfucker was singing a song he calls the Die Song while killing people. And that we get to now read the lyrics of said Die Song. 'Cause if not, I'm finna be pissed. There better actually be a Die Song that I get to witness. Damn it. For the first 22 years of his life, Herbert Mullen showed no signs of the raging psychosis that would eventually take possession of his mind and result in the brutal deaths of 13 random victims. Born in Salinas, California, in April 1947, he seemed to have a normal childhood. He belonged to the Boy Scouts, played Little League baseball, built a treehouse with friends. Years later, he remembered his childhood differently, insisting that his parents had deliberately tried to ruin his life by sending telepathic messages to his schoolmates, threatening to kill them in the afterlife if they played with him. The fuck? By the time he made this wild accusation, Mullen was already far gone in madness. But see, that ain't his fucking fault. He's got many switches fucking in the wrong direction in his head. Fuck. That shit's not his fault. People treat these people real shitty just 'cause they crazy. People need to learn, don't fuck with crazy. 'Cause then you make them even crazier. And then create a serial killer.
I'm just saying, don't fuck with crazy. People fuck with crazy too much. Sometimes you ain't even gotta fuck with crazy, and like this, no one fucked with him. Shit. From first grade until his sophomore year of high school, he attended Catholic parochial school. Then, after his family moved to Santa Cruz, transferred to San Lorenzo Valley High, where he found a girlfriend and formed a close attachment to a buddy named Dean. After Dean's death in a car crash, Mullen first manifested bizarre symptoms, creating a kind of shrine to his friend in his bedroom and staring at it for hours on end. Around this time, Mullen was also introduced to marijuana. It is difficult to know how much significance to attach to either event, however. After all, many people have had similar experiences, losing loved ones in tragic accidents, experiencing withdrawals, without turning into deranged psycho killers. See, I'm real glad they said that, because I was fitting to say that. I forgot the author of this book, but thank you for not being a biased prick. The first indication that something was seriously wrong with Mullen occurred at a family gathering for his parents' 29th anniversary in March 1969. Over dinner, Mullen robotically imitated every word and gesture of his brother-in-law, Al. His behavior was so bizarre that he was finally convinced to check himself into a state mental health hospital, where he was diagnosed from suffering from a schizophrenic reaction. Though the psychiatrist judged that his mental condition was deteriorating and the prognosis was poor, they had no power to keep him in custody. After 6 weeks, Mullen left. For the next few years, he drifted, working at a succession of menial jobs: dishwasher, gas station attendant, truck driver for Goodwill Industries. For a while, he lived in Hawaii. He was in and out of mental hospitals. He began to hear voices commanding him to shave his head and burn his penis with a lighted cigarette. He obeyed both orders. Ow! Doctors, recognizing that he was in the grip of extreme paranoid schizophrenia, warned that his condition was grave. They had no idea of just how dangerous Herbert Mullen was becoming. By October 1972, the voices were telling him to kill. I've always wondered something. What if schizophrenic people aren't like just hearing voices, like in their head? What if like demons or some shit? I don't know. It doesn't have to be like religious demons, just demons. Ghosts, some shit. Like they're just chosen people. And it's just this entity. This evil entity, like whatever your religion or non-religion belief, whatever the fuck, it don't gotta be religious. Whatever belief you got, just evil entity. What if those people are just chosen by the evil entity to hear them? I wondered that when I was little. I have been fucked up since I was little. I came up with that shit when I was small. Anyway. He became convinced that he had been chosen by Albert Einstein to go out and murder people as a way of preventing a cataclysmic earthquake. He described his mission as singing the Die Song. He explained it to his psychiatrist. You see, the thing is, people get together, say, in the White House. People like to see the Die Song, you know? People like to sing the Die Song. If I am president of my class when I graduate from high school, I can tell 2, possibly 3 young male Homo sapiens to die. I can sing that song to them, and they'll have to kill themselves or be killed. An automobile accident, a knifing, a gunshot wound. You ask me why this is, and I say, well, they have to do it in order to protect the ground from an earthquake. Because all of the other people in my community have been dying all year long. In my class, we have to chip in, so to speak, to the darkness, so we have to die also. And people would rather sing the die song than murder. What? 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 I didn't understand a damn word of what he said. Other than, like, these people are dying and we need to chip in on our deaths too. Other than that, I don't get it. I don't know if I'm stupid or what. On October 13th, 1972, not long after a voice in his head barked, "Why won't you give me anything? Go kill someone. Move." Mullen clubbed a 55-year-old drifter to death with a baseball bat on a highway shoulder in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Less than 2 weeks later, he picked up a 24-year-old hitchhiker, stabbed her to death with a hunting knife, then dragged her corpse into some bushes and disemboweled her. Lovely. 8 days later, he entered the confessional of St. Mary's Church in Los Gatos and stabbed the priest to death. I thought he was gonna fucking confess to the priest, and then the priest was gonna have to tell and that's how I got caught. Nope. He just stabbed the priest. Why should I be surprised? In the midst of this hideous campaign, Mullen tried to enlist in the Marines. He impressed the recruiting officer as a highly intelligent and motivated young man who most likely will be a credit to the corps. Ultimately, however, he was turned down. 10 days after applying, Mullen massacred 5 people, including 2 brothers, ages 4 and 9, in a remote area of Santa Cruz Mountains. Not long afterward, while hiking in a state park, he came upon 4 teenage boys in a makeshift cabin and shot them all in the head while they begged for their lives. His final victim was a 72-year-old man shot while working in his yard. Mullen's car was spotted speeding away from the murder scene. He was quickly picked up. In spite of overwhelming evidence of his extravagant mental derangement, the jury deemed Mullen sane by legal standards and found him guilty of 8 counts of second-degree murder and 2 counts of first. On September 18, 1973, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. He was eligible for parole in 2020. Bitch. At the age of 73. And it's usually on the day of your sentencing that people are gifted the parole. That's ooh. Or I think it is, at least. Don't they do, like, the day you're sentenced and then that year you're offered parole? So, like, it would be September 18th, 2020. Because that's soon. Ew. Shit, fuck. No, quit. Oh, okay. On 53, it's a new chapter. Cool. what it means. Because serial killers commit such appalling acts, some experts feel that these criminals can't be placed in any of the usual clinical categories of mental disorder. To them, serial killers exist in a class by themselves, somewhere beyond the outer limits of comprehensible human behavior. In this book, The Meaning of Murder, for example, in his book, John Brophy writes, such men are monsters, who live not merely beyond the unmapped frontiers of sanity, but beyond the frontiers of madness, as madness is conceivable to most people. Like Brophy, who reverts to the ancient term monsters to describe serial killers, some experts have recently abandoned psychological jargon altogether and have gone back to the age-old notion of evil to describe such beings. At a meeting of the American Psychiatric Association in May 2001, forensic psychiatrist Michael Wellner of the New York University School of Medicine defined evil as an intent to cause emotional trauma, to terrorize or target the helpless, to prolong suffering, and to derive satisfaction from it all. That pretty much sums up the behavior of serial killers. Hoo-wee. And then that's a new chapter, hell yes. Whew. Okay. I'm gonna end that there. That's a long as fuck chapter. Alright. Don't forget bodycandy.com, code TaylorCurtis25 for 25% off. You can use it multiple times every time. Yup. Get you some body jewelry. And they have like normal earrings too. So, just go check it out. It's cheap. Like, not in the quality sense. It's good quality for low prices. That's cliche as fuck. Anyway, I will see you all later. Bye.